welcome to those of you who are watching online. We are still getting set up here, and we should be starting in about 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you.
Hey, how are you doing?
Hi, good. How are you doing?
Good. So you guys are using the computer, not a camera.
Yep.
All right.
Yep, we should be all set. Yeah.
Okay. Good luck.
See you.
languages in front of them.
It's important. The worst thing is when you're speaking and all of a sudden you're like,
Hairball!
and then everyone's like, should I get her something?
Yeah, no,
What do I do?
I have it all here.
I feel really comfortable. She's really comfortable. Yeah.
Can we all make this really uncomfortable?
Make sure my phone is off.
Oh, put it on stun, right?
Oh no, I think we should totally take a call right in the middle of it. Excuse me.
So much more fun that way. Especially when it's my daughter calling to yell about something. Mom, you're not gonna believe.
Oh yeah. So it's like,
Mom, Dad's not letting me get on the computer. Well, there must be a good reason for that.
Your father's in charge.
it's like, you really think I'm gonna take your side? Really? All of your 10 years.
When was the last time that worked out for you?
Exactly. There's also. Excellent.
So here's where I'll reveal the age, right? Gotta put on reading glasses.
gotta
to be
read
able
my
to see.
notes.
I gotta see notes. I'll look over the top of them at all of
See,
you.
I have the exact problem, opposite problem that you were talking about. So I graduated here in '98. Somebody else was like, what? And I'm like, yep.
So I had this bizarre conversation. I'm on Quora. You're on Quora. And it's this like website for people asking questions. Yeah. And so I love it. I'm addicted to it. And people asking questions about Russia, right? And what's going on in Russia, Ukraine, whatever. And I graduated from college in 1992. Okay, with a degree in international affairs. So, I was in the middle of,
right.
the
wall
came down,
the whole bit, right?
And surrounded by Soviet majors and so forth. They could learn Russian at one point. And so I'm talking to people online, and they're just like, I don't understand why Ukraine doesn't just give up Crimea to Russia, and why everyone's so upset about it. And I'm like,
Do you want to give up like Virginia?
I made some comment about the Poles or the Baltics and the Poles and anyone who's from Western. Why would the Poles be afraid of the Russians?
Can we turn it on and off?
No, I don't know that.
Do you not know the last 500 years of history?
Welcome everybody. Go ahead and get settled, and then we'll start officially in just a moment.
When you talk, you agree. You don't agree.
She'll just Twitter somewhere else. Okay.
All right, welcome everybody. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Annette Thompson. I'm president of the GW Tech Alumni Group, and I wanted to welcome you all here tonight. Thank you for coming out on this beautiful evening to spend time here with us. I am a 2008 graduate of the GW MSIST program. I'm president of the Tech Alumni Group. We have a great discussion lined up this evening with some wonderful panelists across industry to talk about keys to success as a woman in technology. I also want to welcome those who are attending via the webcast, and I invite you to follow along with the conversation and share your comments and questions with the hashtag GWTech. First, a brief introduction to the Tech Alumni Group. We were founded in 2010. Our mission and what we strive to do is to connect GW students across all fields related to technology, intersecting business, hard technology, and other complementary fields, building on that shared interest and hoping to make connections and create opportunities for people. We have several events each academic year, roundtables such as this one. We did one in the fall that was a roundtable on real-world applications using big data, which is pretty interesting, and we have a webcast of that if you'd like to go back and watch it. Speaker lunches, social events, and that type of thing. I'd like to just say hello to some of the board members in the room. We have Toby Pratt here running our webcast. Hi, Toby. Back here we have Nicole Lynn and Debbie Chungo here as well. So thank you all. We wouldn't be able to put on these events without the support of all of our board volunteers. So on tonight's program, we are going to be talking about women in technology. This is the second time we've done this topic as a roundtable, and we had really good feedback on the first event, and we're really pleased to be able to do it again. Our goal this evening is to provide valuable insights, hopefully some key concrete takeaways that you can apply as you're looking to further your career in technology. I'd like to introduce our speakers. This is Dorine Andrews. She is CIO of the Peace Corps. She's responsible for the Peace Corps Global Network, spanning over 70 posts, 9 regional offices, and Peace Corps Global Headquarters. She has considerable research background in managing organizational and technology change, knowledge management, enterprise systems. She has co-authored books on these topics. Her previous experience includes co-founding a management consulting company, an international systems design company, and 12 years at Bell Laboratories and AT&T. Dorine, Dr. Andrews has held faculty positions at Georgetown, University of Baltimore, and Marymount University. She has a bachelor's degree from North Central College, a master's from Loyola in Chicago, and a PhD in communications from University of Baltimore. Next we have Linda Gilpin. Linda is Director of IT Submission Processing at the IRS. Favorite person this time of year? I should
have been smart and just said treasury.
She's responsible for the systems that receive and process electronic and paper tax returns, including individual business and joint returns. Prior to joining the IRS, Linda was Vice President at American Management Systems for 12 years. Her early career included roles as a developer, a systems analyst, data and process modeler, project and program manager in the oil and gas and telecommunications industries. Linda brings a BA from Rice University. Welcome, Linda. Here to my left is Siobhan Green. Siobhan is the founder of Sonjara Inc., a technology company that she started in 2002. She serves as the owner and lead technology analyst, working with nonprofits, for-profits, government organizations, and international organizations. Prior to founding her business, she worked at the Academy for Educational Development and integrated communications and entertainment, incorporated in a variety of digital production roles. Siobhan has a bachelor's in foreign science from Georgetown and a master's from the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London. And last but not least, Deborah Reilly. Deb is the division chief at the International Monetary Fund. Her career spans 30 years in IT at the IMF, with a focus on information management, knowledge management, enterprise content management, business relationship management, and women in IT. She was instrumental in founding the first Women in IT program at the IMF, a program that has expanded in scope over the years and received accolades along the way. She has an undergraduate degree in math and psychology from the College of William and Mary. Welcome. So the format of this evening, each of our speakers will be giving a brief presentation, lending their insight into the topic, and then we'll open it up to the group for Q&A. So let's get started.
Oh.
Yeah.
We're going to go in order. Third. Okay. I'm really, I should do this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm really pleased to be here. I took my view as to what do you need to do to have a seat at the IT table. And because if you have a seat at the IT table, then you have a chance to be at the business table as well. So my position, because I've been around so long, is that whatever formal business rules there are around hiring and promoting women, they often don't apply because there are ways to work around it. Okay, so yes, they can help you. I've seen the development of support for, you know, requiring people to have to hire a woman, interview a woman, you make sure there's one in the pack, you know, in the interview group and that kind of thing. But I think that no matter whether you're a woman or a man, there are things you can do to make yourself known and stand out. So when opportunities arise, they remember who you are and they ask you to apply. And that's where I come in. Personally, I make 2 of my directors are women, and two of my directors are guys, and they're all wonderful, and they play well together, which is always amazing. So the first thing I think you need to figure out if you want to work in IT is whether or not there's a good fit. If you have a degree in engineering, then you can do hardware and networking and those kinds of things. A lot of us as women are not attracted to those hard sciences that way, but that doesn't mean you can't work in IT. Software development, the front end of the business, the whole consulting with the client, with customers, whether they're internal or external, the whole business of requirements and getting businesses to come to consensus about what their business rules are going to be so you could build something for them, which they don't quite get all the time. The methodologists, I'm a long-time methodologist, and I believe that if you've got a standard methodology, you can calculate how much time anything's going to take. And I also believe the back end of the business is another area where women can really excel in. And that's the whole customer support services area. Service desk, financial management, training, support, problem solving, all those areas where I believe women, we are brought up to have better relationship skills than men. We're rewarded for being happy with each other and making people feel good. Then you have to ask yourself, what do you want to take? Do you want to take a leadership path or a technology expert road? Because much different skill sets. If you notice, you listen to where we're all from, we're not hardcore technologists by trade. And when I meet a CIO who starts talking to me in gigabytes and switches and all that kind of stuff, I just go, excuse me, could you speak English? Because I think CIOs and technical people really hurt themselves if they can't translate the technology into understandable business words and language. And that's basically my job. That's what I do. I provide vision, I provide resources, and I provide guidance, and then I get out of the way. And I make sure, and I try to get to my people and train them to talk as well. There are some people in IT who will never learn to communicate well. I've had developers, my director of development come to me and he goes, every time we try to get those operations and engineering guys to come to the meetings, they don't show up. And I go, well, did you go to their office and walk them over to the meeting? Well, I shouldn't have to do that. I said, yes, you do. Because what they do so well, that they don't talk. They work. And so you got to get them engaged. Find out how to get them engaged. So we do a lot of that. The other thing is you don't have to be a mad extrovert like I am to be a leader. And an extrovert is someone who gets energy from being around other people. If you're a natural introvert, you get energy from being quiet and thinking and from the inside. I think good leadership really requires introverts to act like they're extroverts and push themselves out there, even though it's uncomfortable. But that's a personal choice. Good instructors and teachers are the same way. They may be introverted inside, but the really good ones act like extroverts. They give people energy, and that's what's important. Also, IT people are fact-based. So if you come in and say, I think we need to do this because here are the 4 facts, here are the practical reasons, and here's my evidence, they're going to like you. they're going to say, that's logical. But if you come in and say, oh, we really have to do this because it's so important to our customer, they go, crap, I don't care. So I mean, it's extreme. But it really is important that you become evidence-based. Lawyers make good IT people because they're evidence-based. IT people like clear. The research clearly shows that they like good, clear, clean beginnings and ends. We like project work. We like black and white. The messy stuff of requirements, of getting users to use the systems and supporting them, all that stuff that has to do with the people on the outside, is not easy for a lot of IT people, particularly those who are very technical, hardware, networking, operations oriented. They'd much rather talk to their servers. It's very important. But however, do not think that they're not passionate about their beliefs and what the right way to do something is. I've had several religious wars over what server we should pick and what networking we should do and all kinds of things. So you have to see that they're passionate even though they aren't good communicators. And because they're so passionate and they're not good communicators, they don't listen. They talk over each other all the time. And therefore, as women, we are very well positioned to run the 5-minute rule on them, make them listen to each other, and help them find out where their common ground is so they can resolve their issues. You, as a leader, you actually may be perceived as a bitch. Okay? Get used to it. It's the nature of leadership with women. They expect you to act and behave in a certain way, and when you're on the inside of the organization, if you're the short blonde person, they want you to be sweet and funny and cute, and I'm not. And so it's like, I get a lot of this. And that's okay, but they respect me because I get things done. So understand that you aren't always you can't change what their beliefs are, but you can change and demand their behavior. When I was a consultant, however, it was a real advantage to be a woman because executives would trust me before they trust a male consultant because I was considered non-competing, and I bet you need to talk about that. So start to figure out what that relationship and what is it that you can excel at and leverage. The other thing is you need to speak up. The people that get noticed in my organizations are those that speak up in meetings, they ask questions, they have ideas, they come to, I have an open door policy, they come and say, Dorine, I gotta talk to you. And I go, fine. And they may talk to me about something personal, they may talk about something that they think Steve's doing wrong, or that Bill's doing wrong, or that Sandy's doing wrong, and I just listen. I say, thank you. And sometimes there's some really great information behind that. I think the biggest thing that in the IT business or any business is to be self-aware. If you think you are the smartest person in the room, you are in trouble because you are arrogant, you don't listen to people, you cut people off, and you start dictating solutions, which is, as a leader, your job is to dictate the vision and provide some structure, but it's their job to execute on that vision and figure out what the best solution is. Know your strengths. Do not focus on your weaknesses. One of the things you have to know is that I am not, I don't know hardware, I don't know networking, I don't know security. I used to know software, and I don't know financials very well. And therefore, I surrounded my direct, immediate reports with people who are very good at those skill sets. So that they take care of my weaknesses. That allows me to focus on my strengths. Don't be afraid to challenge. I said that. Learn to love your CFO. You may have a budget. You may even have the ability to move money around, which I don't very much. But the CFO holds the purse strings. And if they understand you and are in parallel and aligned with what you want to do for the business, because The other thing is to be very mission driven. Do not make it a personal thing that you want to accomplish. You want to accomplish stuff for the mission of the business and to keep customers satisfied. Build customer partnerships. I think Deb's going to talk about that. And fess up when you need to. When I make a mistake, you know, I don't blame other people. I'm the first one to sit there and say, it was my call. I'm the one who didn't set up that steering committee right. I'm the one who let the project manager go without intervention. So that also builds trust with people. It also, your staff, then they know that they are free to make mistakes because if I fess up to it, Shannon will fess up to it too. Okay, and that's kind of my helpful hints for IT, working in IT.
Thank you.
So I'm Linda Gilpin, and I'm the director of all of the systems of the IRS that process. Oops, it's not on. Here we go. Is that better? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So I am the director over all of the IT systems that process all of the returns, whether individual or business, or everything that comes into the IRS, information, returns, all the 1099. So we've got lots and lots of volume this time of year, and I know it's everybody's favorite agency. I was brought into the IRS to be a change agent, and I've been there 9 years at this point. And if you know, the title, the topic that I was asked to speak on is moving an IT organization forward over time. And for an organization like the IRS, over time takes on a whole new meaning. So here's the, we were talking about why can't the IRS modernize back in 1963. So we have a long and illustrious track record there. And if you think about the business environment and how that's changed over the course of the last 50 years, it's pretty staggering. And I won't read through all these stats, but just exponential growth and massive change in the environment, in IT, in the capabilities of technology, but more importantly, in our customers and what their level of technology, sophistication, access capabilities, it's just night and day. And when you think about some of the challenges of an agency that has let's say a lot of legacy, very, very old systems trying to deliver and make those things happen. And when you've got the mindsets and infrastructure and organization that went along with that 40-year-old system, one of the things that was staggering to me, having grown up in the private sector world, my role at the IRS was my first government position, was the number of people that have been there their entire careers, 35, 40 years, many of the people working in the same areas, which gives you incredible advantage for the longevity and understanding and depth and just incredible expertise, but there historically have been very little new blood brought in from the outside. So 10 years ago or so, there was a focused effort in bringing folks in from the outside so that we could partner and have ideas and leverage things from the outside, partnered with all of that incredible in-depth expertise on the inside. And so think about change in that context. So I just want to spend a few minutes on some of the things that have really made a difference, because I can tell you it's pretty daunting when you face that sort of an environment. And you're new to the government, and you're a woman, and you're going to be trying to drive all of this incredible change. I think having that vision and saying where you're headed is obviously essential and a critical step and as a leader. And I was brought in to drive change, and I'm very proud of some of the things that we did in those early years. We laid some real foundation building blocks, and I have benefited from seeing some incredible leadership and being part of some incredible leadership. We had a new CTO join about 5 years ago with an absolute, just embody the have a clear vision and drive for it. And he came on board and said, IRS IT will become world-class. We will be a world-class IT organization. And that's this big, huge, forward-looking goal, because we certainly had all the challenges you can imagine that you have in an organization that size. He put a framework in place and helped us understand why we could get a lot more bang for our buck of the energy towards change than we had in some of our previous efforts. Lots of successes, but some more so or less so, and fragmented. So driving forward that framework, and always, everything we did, paying attention to all three dimensions. It's not just about the technology. In fact, more often than not, it's the people, and it's the challenges with the people, and it's the challenges with the communication. It's almost never because it's so hard technically. So you've got to pay attention to that, and then the process, because there's no process. You know, we love process. We layer it on and layer it on, but how do you make it work for you? So if we always have those three dimensions, it can make a huge difference. Some of the key areas, I mean, everyone who's done change, worked for any length of time on various projects, or read all of the great literature that you can, the tips and techniques are pretty consistent. I will just say, one of the things that I have seen make such a huge difference is getting the executive leadership truly on board, not just the top-down, you hear sponsorship and shared vision, all that, but really speaking the same language and really in it for the long haul, because especially in government, the waited out mentality, this too shall pass, people have that for a reason, because it works. They're there for the 40 and 50 years, and they have seen so many people. I had 4 CIOs in my first 3.5 years in that job. So, you know, wait it out is a viable strategy. So you've got to overcome that. You've got to show the perseverance, and that you're in it for the long haul. And by the way, it's going to become ingrained, so that even if one particular person leaves, it's going to be part of the culture and how it's going to keep going. So having the same language and that shared vision amongst the executive leadership team really was one of the things that made a huge difference. It also gave you that networking and ability to connect in a way that just your day-to-day job doesn't. And it's back to some of the things that you mentioned in terms of really engaging and communicating. Yeah, the communication is just, you know, it can't be said enough, and you can't do it enough, you can never do it well enough, and it's always got to be what you start with and end with. And finding the right ways and the right channels, of course, is the trick, and a lot of it does come down to style as well as what works in your organization. So the whole helping people understand why the change is necessary, what you're driving for. And another big aha for me is that it's not enough just to understand and address the pain points. That is necessary, but not sufficient. Because if you're only addressing the pain points, you're nibbling at the edges. And yes, sometimes you have to do some of that, but if you're really looking for that major shift, you need to think about broader possibilities, things that maybe people haven't even thought of, and didn't know they needed, could benefit from, but once you open that door and they start to understand how that could change the way they do business, the way they interact with the customers, the way internal and external, it can really drastically change things, and you'll never get to that level of change if you only concentrate on, I'm just going to fix this process or fix this pain point or incrementally tweak it around the edges. So you've got to be pretty gutsy and brave to take that leap and put it out there. And the other thing is helping yourself and your colleagues and the organization by understanding how you're going to know when you got there, or in incremental steps along the way, the whole measurement, where you're starting from and where you're going, and how you show that value, because it really is a journey. It won't be a one-stop victory, and without that along the way, you lose steam and momentum, and it stops happening for the organization. So being able to articulate that, again, the whole communication of the whys and what's and how we're going to show all that value is really critical. So one of the things that's really critical, and having worked with I used to say as a consultant, in one calendar year you get 3 or 4 years worth of experience because you work on so many different projects and so many different clients and industries, and you really cram that in, and it highlighted for me just how different various organizations and cultures are. Not that there's anything new under the sun, you recognize the patterns, but there are different challenges and different goals and missions at the various organizations. So understanding where you're at, what that means for you as you plan the change and how to communicate, and what you're really driving for. I like to say the mission of the agency, absolutely that should be driving, but for us, a lot of the change we're doing is it's how do we change dramatically the business of IT, which is then in service of the overall mission. But our focus is about improving the mission of IT, and some of that is about the value add for the systems that we provide, or the accuracy, or the online services, or all of the things that facilitate that. But for us to do those things well, we have to focus on the infrastructure. We have to focus on our on-time delivery and being reliable, and all of the things that go into a well-run IT shop. Raising the bar on that is a huge push that will ultimately benefit the overall agency. So helping people understand the why and that long-term vision without them becoming so overwhelmed that they just give up. Because you see that long-term and you think, world class, how will we ever get from here to there? How will we ever climb that Mount Everest? Well, it's one station at a time, one step at a time, and you've got to lay that big vision out, but then help people understand incrementally how you're going to get there, so they don't just throw up their hands and give up and say it can't be done. You've got to bring them along with you. One of the things that has been very effective is the classic, chunk things up, measure, show that improvement, and engage with the right pilots, and all of the classic early wins, show the value, get people engaged, and then you will never bring everyone along. Some subset you will never convince, and they will never be on board, and you can't let that derail you. So you've got to focus on the ones that you can. They will eventually retire, or just keep the trains running in their space. Because one of our challenges is we have to always keep all the trains running in the midst of the change. So it's the whole rebuild the engine in flight, because you can't afford not to deliver your mission. So you always have a need for people who are going to keep those trains running, and that's valuable, and if that's what they want in their skill set, great. You focus on that, and then others will have time to add some of these other key activities that will drive some change forward. A few things that really have struck me over the years is that if If you wait until you feel like you're fully qualified and fully ready and you have the perfect plan, just hang it up. You're never going to get there. You have to be willing to step out and have a good enough plan that will move you forward, because however good that plan is, you will figure out a bit into it that it should have been a bit different, it could have been better, and this is how you'll adjust it. And that cycle is what you have to be really comfortable with. And learning, listening to people, hearing that feedback so that you can successfully do those things. I love your comment about the facts and data, because I've got, the one I highlighted to be sure and mention was laser focus on facts and data and risk-based decision, because at the end of the day, none of us, whatever our organizations, we will never have enough resources, enough money to do all the great things that we know we would like to do if only we had all of the unlimited funds and staffing. I have really come to depend on the risk-based decision model, the facts and data for prioritization, for what really matters, for what's going to change, and to get away from the emotion. Because so many of the religious wars and other things that go on within IT and between IT and the business really come down to people's emotions over the actual facts. And when you get those facts on the table and you understand what they're really telling you, then you can have a logical conversation about those trade-offs and those prioritizations. And it helps you engage with people in a way that's not threatening, and that they can respect even if they disagree at the end of the day. And then the decision makers at the right level make those decisions based on all the right input. It's huge in managing large organizations. It's huge in driving change, because you have to make those tough calls on a regular basis to prioritize and make sure you continue to drive forward. And it's always about the communication and being comfortable with that and engaging with people throughout the organization and building on those skills to make that happen. You need a cooker? It's the
There we go. Well, I don't know about anyone else, but I took pages of notes so far.
I'm doodling in the margins on mine.
No, I've already learned a tremendous amount, so hopefully we'll continue with that. But at the very least, I've gotten something really valuable out of this. So I'm Siobhan Green. I'm the owner of Sonjara. And I'm to talk about women-owned small businesses, or small business ownership, as a way for women in technology to be able to move forward. So I'm going to talk to you about a little bit about Sonjara, what we do and who we are, and sort of my story of how I went from employee to employer, and then sort of information about small business right now, especially in Washington, why women start businesses, some of the challenges around starting your own business, some of the great opportunities, and some things to know before you make the jump, or in my case, I should have known before I made the jump, and then some final tips and tricks about just things to think about if you are planning on starting your own business at some point. So about Sonjara. We founded in 2002, actually as a shell for my husband's contracting business. He's a software developer. And in 2004, we switched places because I was working in IT for international development. I had a great job with a nonprofit, and I had my first child, and disagreements with my boss about work-life balance meant that I needed to be more a freelancer, and I'll talk a little about that in a moment. We at Sonjara, we offer technology evaluation, technology consulting, and rapid application development for mobile and web applications. And we specialize in knowledge management systems, working in international development, emerging markets, education, and startups, entrepreneurs. We actually do a lot of work with USAID, and that's actually my personal background, was international development. And I'm really passionate about IT and women, and gender especially, and I'm really hoping that continues on an upward climb. We like to say that our favorite clients are passionate professionals with crazy, brilliant ideas, and we help them make them into reality. So, how did I go from working for a fluffy nonprofit, as I like to say, to running my own business? Well, I like this picture because this is completely false. I did not sit there and say, I have a brilliant business plan and one day wake up and execute it. No, it was more like this. What happened was I had a background in international development, undergraduate degree in international affairs, graduate degree in anthropology, but I also had the good experience of being able to live in Senegal in the early 90s, and I actually had an email account. And when I was there, I realized that the internet was going to be transformative to the continent of Africa, especially just knowing my Senegalese friends and seeing their responses to the computer that I had and the information I could get access to instantly. I said, this is going to be the next best thing, and I want to be involved in it. Because I always loved computers. I was the person who always figured out how the printers worked, right? So I ended up doing my degree in anthropology, focusing on West Africa, but my master's dissertation was the internet in Africa, and looking at policy papers by the World Bank and the UN on how it was being transformative. This was 1997, so it was before they even had things like the AP citation rules for websites. I'm making stuff up as I was going along. It was fabulous. And so I worked in a lot of nonprofits. Nonprofits are a horrible place to learn about technology. When I'm the person who's teaching myself HTML and teaching myself databases because nobody else can figure it out, yeah. So I ended up jumping and going to work for a company called ICE during the dot-com boom. Made a lot more money, working for Citibank and Fidelity and PwC, and saying, but I really want to be working in the international development space. And so I ended up then eventually working for AED, Academy for Education Development. And I probably would have stayed there for a very long time if it hadn't been for my boss, who was not willing to work with me in work-life balance. And I said, you know what, I quit. And he said, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And I'll hire you as a freelancer. And I said, okay, wait, I get to earn more money per hour. I get to work from home. And I get to charge you for every time you change your mind. We're in. And what happened was, so I ended up going freelance, doing a lot of writing, editing, HTML work, started being asked to build websites for people. As soon as I got to things that were beyond my skill set, I could grab my husband, and he would sort of do weekend and evening works. I would work on the business requirements, and he'd work on the software side of it, and discovered that I actually really love data, love databases. So despite my anthropology degree, or I actually think because of my anthropology degree, I found a real affinity for technology, and that we work very well together. So in terms of the way the business has gone, we started off just me, and then it was the two of us, and then it was in 2008 we won some big contracts with USAID. We grew, we shrunk, we've grown. 2013 was horrible in contracting, so we've shrunk again, and we're sitting waiting for some contracts to come along, which hopefully means we're going to grow again. 2014 is supposed to be much better in that world. So, the situation of women-owned businesses in general, and this is beyond IT businesses, but IT, of course, is a huge hot sector right now. There are now more women-owned businesses than ever before, and we're also the fastest-growing demographic in new businesses. DC especially is very hot for women-owned businesses. We are actually number 5 out of the top 25 most populated cities for women-owned businesses, just the sheer numbers of them. And DC has one of the top cities for growth in women-owned businesses. I actually think the reason for it, first of all, there's a lot of growth in general in DC, but I do think that the government contracting world has a role in that. The fact that there are very explicit women-owned business goals within government that the government so far has not really met across the board, as well as the 8M program for different NAICS codes. Those are the North American Industry Codes, and IT is one of those codes. So it's an area where women are underrepresented, and so there's an opportunity for set-aside programs beyond just the women in small business. And SBA also and other groups have heavily funded lots of entrepreneurial support for women-owned small businesses in this area. So I do think it's a great area to be a woman owning your business. There's a lot of support here. And just some numbers here. This actually came from the American Express Open Women Able estimates. Just if you look in terms of the number of firms, the last one, the end, 59.1% is women-owned. we do really well. We've been, in terms of this recession, we've actually held our own in terms of employment, and our revenues have also gone up. So there's a lot to be said for women in businesses being successful. And in fact, what's interesting is that women of color have also raised significantly in terms of women in businesses. From this report, 17% of women in firms 16 years ago were firms owned by women of color. They now account for 1/3 of all women-owned businesses. And again, I think the fact that this area has so much support for different traditionally disadvantaged groups actually has a very strong positive impact. It allows us to say, you know what, I see a lot of role models out there. I can be like her, I can be like him, and I'm going to do it too. So, why do women start their own businesses? There's a lot of different reasons, and my personal sort of anecdata that I've collected is that a lot of them start their own businesses because they're voting with their feet. They are not being treated the way that they would like to be treated in corporate America, some cases government, and nonprofits, and they know that they have skills that they can sell. They might have a product that they want to provide, and they can't necessarily support that in the environment that they're in. They oftentimes, a big area, especially in technology, for women to leave the sort of paid employment world is when they have children, and especially the second child. And so oftentimes women who need the income will actually go and start their own businesses, either as a single owner operator, instead of being a stay-at-home mom, and they continue to keep their hand in through being consultants, etc. They want more control over the terms of their work-life balance, and they want to make more money than they are working for other people. So, some of the challenges to starting your own business, because if it were so easy, everyone would do it and no one would work for anyone else. It takes money. This, to me, I think is one of the biggest issues. At the very least, you need to be able to go without an income for a while. You may need startup funding. Certainly, if you have a product you want to bring to market, you're going to need money in order to build that product if you can't build it yourself. If you're offering a service, there's going to be times when you're going to have to cover your own income from other sources while you wait to get paid. Getting paid is a big pain in the butt. You need to be able to cover your own health insurance if you don't have a spouse who has health insurance and so forth. And there's other costs like incorporation, tax accountant, bookkeeping, and so forth. So you just have to keep in mind that there are some substantial costs. There can be some substantial costs when you're starting a business. Ironically, work-life balance. Now, this is something that, and my husband and I every once in a while we say, what are we doing? We should stop running a business. We should just go get day jobs because it would be so much less work, and we'd be able to have weekends and so forth. On the other hand, I can take 5 days off and spend a few days with my kids and not have to ask permission. I can, go tomorrow in the middle of the day to my kids' school and not have to tell anyone that I'm doing it or get someone rolling their eyes at me because I'm not serious about my career. Which, by the way, is a quote from my previous job about how I wasn't serious about my career. The real thing is that nobody other than you is going to tell you how to balance your life. And so therefore, it's very easy to have no balance, to have your phone with you at all times and check email late at night, and to always be working, because no one's going to tell you you've done enough, you've done for the day, and there's always more to be done. So you need to have that responsibility to control what you think is enough to actually do a good job. There's risk. If you own a business and you're borrowing money, let's say because you now have employees and you need to make payroll, and if someone hasn't paid you in time, you got to borrow a couple $1,000s to make payroll. That money isn't borrowed. Your company doesn't borrow that money. You do. That's in your name. If you end up not delivering for a client and they get mad at you and they sue you, you're the owner. The buck stops with you. If an employee suddenly goes crazy, that's or makes a client angry, or or becomes sick and isn't able to perform, the buck stops with you. So that's one of the downsides, is that the risk is there that you need to be able to take on and be able to live with. And again, that's another reason why sometimes I say, I want a day job. I don't want to take on this risk. But then I realize that, the risk-reward bet has to be in my favor. And finally, there's discrimination. Flat out, there's discrimination. Any discrimination you find as a woman in technology, you're going to find as a woman who's the owner of a technology People who don't take you seriously when you're an employee may not take you seriously when you're the owner. But as I said, you may also be assumed to be a great communicator, more trustworthy, and so forth because you're a woman, so you can use it in your favor. But just to give you an example, I belong to some entrepreneurial groups, supporting men and women in the DC metro area, and I had a weird comment. We were sort of all vetching about, oh, I never see my kids. Oh, my life is so hard. The kind of thing you do when you're over a couple drinks with some people. And I made some comment about like, oh yeah, it's hard sometimes because I sometimes feel guilty about, not being there for my kids as much as I want to because I'm a mom and that's what we do. And I really did have one of the other business owners saying, well, why don't you just stay home with your kids and have your husband in your business? And I'm like, what? So yeah, and he apologized later, but it still happens where there's this assumption that you're a woman, you're the mom, you're the one taking care. People do ask my husband sometimes if he babysits, and he says, no, I have too much work with my own 2 kids. By the way, that's also one of the opportunities is that my husband found that he was actually not able to spend as much time with our kids when he worked for somebody else because they kept on saying, you have a wife, why are you the one making to be home? So also another opportunity is the financial rewards. When it goes wrong, yes, you're going to be the one on the hook for the bill. But when it goes right, you're the one who makes all the money, and you get to be the one to make the decision about how much you want to get paid, what kind of health care you want to have, where you want to have your office, all of these things. This is the reward for the risk that you're taking on. There's no way that I could ever make as much money, potential as much money, in a day job as I could make owning my own business. I have full control over the rules. We do things that other people say are stupid. We have rules about flexibility. We say position by position, each job has position by position determines flexibility over location and hours, which means that, yeah, you're a receptionist, you got to be in the office from 9 to 5. But if you're the QA guy, do your work at 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't care. Do your work from home, do your work from Aruba, I don't care, as long as you get your work done. We decided we wanted to do performance-based management, and so we're very focused on that. We also did when I'm the boss, there's all these things that I'm never going to do, and we put those into place. And the nice thing is, who's going to tell you no? You're the boss. Okay, this is one of my favorites, actually, firing clients. To be honest, we've never successfully fired a client, because every time we tried to, they'd come begging back to us saying, please don't fire us. Here's the thing with firing clients. Sometimes there's people out there who are jerks. They'll try to take advantage of you, they'll try to mess you around, and sometimes people you just don't get along with. When you're in an employment situation, you just kind of got to deal. And sometimes when you work, when they're your client, you have to deal, especially if they're a major client and they're paying the bills. But you can make a plan to say, I am going to get rid of that person. That person is gone from my life as soon as I can possibly afford it. And then, when you can, you say, I'm very sorry, but clearly we are no longer on the same page and we are no longer able to support you. Thank you very much. Goodbye. It's a wonderful feeling. It really is, because it gives you the sense of standing up for yourself and empowerment that is really hard to find, honestly, in an employment situation. Although I've had a couple of positive ones there too. I've had supportive bosses. You can leapfrog your career. I'm sitting at a table with some amazing women. If I had stayed in my job, I would not have been able to sit at this table. I don't think my career would have progressed nearly as quickly if I'd stayed working for somebody else. I've met the administrator of USAID. I have met senators. I have met congressmen. I've met with the staff of people on the Hill. And I'm the CEO of a company that has 5 people. That shouldn't be impressive, but I also get invited to CEO roundtables, and so I sit at the table with people who have 5,000 employees. It's an incredibly empowering feeling of I get to define who I am, and for some reason everyone takes me seriously because I have those 3 little letters after my name. It's great. Finally, probably the most important thing, you get to build something that matters. I feel very passionately about using technology to affect real change. I saw it in international development. I see it in education, another area we work in. I also see it with startups. I like getting things done, which is one of the reasons why I love technology, because there's a real thing It either you push the button and it works, or it doesn't work. It collects the data, or it doesn't collect the data. It's not sort of soft and fluffy. It has real impact on people. And if you get it right, and it's hard to get right, you really can change things. And I love seeing that. I'm really proud of the work that we do. I love the sites that we've built, and I love the changes we've made for our clients. So, before you jump, I'm sure everyone here's like, that's it, I'm quitting my day job, I'm going to go start my own company. Okay, before you do that, what are you selling? I was pretty lucky in that I basically was asked to sell what I was doing before. The first question is, there's really two types of companies. There's product companies and there's service companies. A product company is pretty straightforward, you're selling a product. Software as a service is actually a product company. So if you're buying something like Basecamp, it's a product. You're building it once, you're selling it to a lot of people. A service is consulting. I come in, it's very specific to me, it's very specific to the people on my team. They want to hire someone with my specific skill set, and I go and I help build something that's custom for them. Products take a lot more upfront cash and work. And there's a lot of them that never make any money. Services, you can hit the ground running since you're selling you, and that's usually how people start their own companies, is they start off basically saying, I'll work for you, but no longer on a W-2, now on a 1099 or on a corp-to-corp basis, and I'll basically do what I did before, but I'll make more money, like it. The problem with as a service is that you may have limitations in terms of how much you scale because you're selling you, and there's only 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, and hopefully you didn't start this company so that you'd be working every single hour. So you have to think about that too as you're selling. What am I selling myself? Am I selling something that I can replicate? Can I create a methodology that allows me to sell what I do, but implemented by other people? Who are you selling to? This is a big question, and oftentimes people sort of underestimate how much information they need in order to sell. Selling to people you know is 10,000 times easier than selling to strangers. First of all, they know you. They know you, they know they can trust you, they know what you can do, what you're capable of doing. You know them. You know what their needs are. You know how they describe their needs. You understand their pain points, you also understand maybe some things that they don't understand about the vision. You can also understand their current environments. Selling to strangers requires a lot of research and turning them not into strangers, but into people that you know. And so part of it also is when you're selling is all about relationships. It's about building relationships with people, building relationships so that they trust you and you can trust them and understand each other. And again, sort of women tend to be very good at that, which is why I think women-owned businesses actually tend to do very, very well. Finally, what resources do you need in order to deliver what you're selling? This is something to think of very seriously. It's easy to sell what you do, and then when someone says to you, well, can you also do this? Oh yeah, sure, I can do that. Yeah, okay. And it's a balancing act that all small businesses do. You never want to say no, I can't do that. But at the same time, you also don't want to say yes to something that you can't deliver. You especially don't want to say yes to something you can't deliver at a price you can't afford. Okay, I have made that mistake a couple different times, and it's a very common one. To say, oh, well, how hard could it be? I could easily find a PHP developer who will work for $20 an hour. Yeah, not so much. So, you do have to think about all the resources you need. For example, what skills you need. What cash do you need? Cash is going to kill you. Cash is king. If you can't pay people, they won't work for you. Also, if you can't pay people, the Department of Labor gets really, really, really upset. And by the way, pay the IRS first. Seriously. Biggest mistake I see small businesses do is they say, well, I'll pay the IRS when I make a profit. Bad idea.
We have systems for that.
They have systems for that. They will find you. So, think about your relationships as you need, what people you need. And if you've got a ton of money, congratulations. It's a lot easier to build a business if you've got a lot of money. If you're bootstrapping, it's a lot harder and you may have to go slow and go a little bit, basically build it up and build your company through revenue. So finally, some other tips and tricks. First of all, take care of the legal and accounting. A lot of times, and we did this too in our first year, we sort of forgot about the bookkeeping for a while. We had a QuickBooks account, we kind of meant to put it updated every month or so, and Then it came time to file our taxes, and we went, wow, we kind of didn't do anything for the last 6 months. Oops. Yeah, not good. Not good at all. Luckily, we were small enough that it was fairly easy for us to recreate it, but if we were at the size now, and especially when you have government contracts, don't do that. Make sure you're accounting, you have to pay for it probably, unless you know somebody's a bookkeeper. Get your legal situation set up. You probably want to check also if you're currently working for an employer to make sure that there's no legal agreements that prevent you from taking your idea, starting your own business, working on the side, that type of thing. And actually, one thing there is you can possibly partner with your current employer. If they're not interested in exploring a new area, but you are, there's a lot of mentor-protege relationships out there where you start your own company with the help of your existing company. Get some really good contracts, and if you can get some legal advice, especially, and there's some pro bono lawyers out there who help emerging small businesses, they'll really help you make sure you don't make huge mistakes. Use local small business resources. As I said before, SBA and others have paid for a lot of great resources in this area. SCORE is one. Don't ask me what it stands for, but it's small something, I don't remember what it stands for. But they've got offices all over, and they offer mentors, relationships with, and give advice and pro bono assistance and really great assistance about, I want to start a small business, what do I need to do, how do I put a business plan, where should I incorporate, where should I get a license, et cetera, et cetera. Use your network. Tell everyone you know that you are starting a business and what you sell. And ask them, hey, if you know of anyone who could use this. If you know someone who might be a buyer, hey, they might actually, instead of saying, I'm going to sell to you, say, hey, would you mind me picking your brain so that I understand what your needs are? What kind of price point would you look for? What kind of questions would you have for me? What would you need to see in terms of certifications? So that you're now getting more insight into your buyers. And the nice thing is that through your network, you might end up actually selling to them, but not in a way that's pushy and hard sales and so forth. So most sales are based on relationships, and referrals and word of mouth can really sustain you for a really, really long time. Should I incorporate? Yes. And whether you incorporate an S Corp, C Corp, I'm not a lawyer, please ask a lawyer, LLC, whatever. But 9 times, I don't really know any reason why you shouldn't incorporate if you're going to be taking clients. It protects you so much, and it helps actually with the tax situation. It makes it a lot cleaner and clearer about business expenses versus non-business expenses, and it's just always a good thing to do. It gives you so much more control over your financial picture and it's only like $100. It's really not expensive, and you can do it online, and it's really straightforward. So please incorporate. And that is everything. And that's me.
They're hard to follow. All right, so here we go. First of all, I'm old, and so I'm going to put my glasses on so that I make sure that I catch the points that I wanted to make sure I shared with all of you tonight. First, let me say how delighted I am to be here, and a special thanks to my colleague Debbie Chungu, sitting back here, who invited me to join you all tonight. I'm really pleased. My name again is Deborah Reilly. I'm a division chief at the International Monetary Fund. Quick show of hands, does everyone know what the IMF is and what we do? All right, I don't need to run through my quick spiel then about who we are and what we do. A lot of people will confuse us with the World Bank, and so sometimes it's helpful to distinguish between the two. Do you want me to do that or no? Yes or no? Yes? Distinguish? All right, I will do a quick distinction between them. So we're sister organizations, and we are typically called the lender of last resort, the International Monetary Fund is. We're part firefighter, so we lend money to countries to stabilize their economy, typically when they're in pretty deep trouble. We're part doctor, so we do preventive checkups on countries' financial health and make advice and recommendations for them on how to get back on better footing. Sometimes that's tied to the lending that we do to help them get to where they need to be. And we're part coach. We train government officials and key sectors in the government on how to bring and sustain macroeconomic stability in their countries. So those are sort of the 3 big umbrellas we follow. Now, I'm going to have to be kept really honest because there are 2 people from the IMF here. So I'm going to look at them from time to time and see if they're going, what is she talking about? Or smiling and nodding. It's all good. Okay. A bit about background about me. I've been with the International Monetary Fund for 30 years, which is most of my professional career. And so I recognize that I'm looking at the world through a really specific lens, right? Not many people sit in a public sector, quasi-government, nonprofit kind of role for that long. And so I realize my lens is very specific. It isn't the lens that everyone else is looking at the world through, but I'm hoping that some of the things that I talk about will resonate with you. And I certainly heard a lot from each of you that resonated with me, so let's go. I'm going to talk a little bit about women in IT at the IMF. And like many of you, I've received lots of great advice over the years. Everything from you were given 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you should use them proportionately, to keep your words soft and sweet. You never know when you're going to need to eat them. But the one piece of advice that I got a few years ago really hit home for me, and it was to keep your eyes wide open. So I was sitting at the IT leadership table about 3 years ago, and that table includes the CIO and the deputy CIO and the chief information security officer and the enterprise architect and the advanced technology lead and blah, 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 and myself among the other division chiefs. I looked around the table. There's 16 people at that table. 16. And one of them was a woman. I was the only one at the table. It wasn't something that happened overnight, so I didn't sort of see it creeping up on us. When I first joined that table, there were 5 of us there. And over time and with attrition and as things changed, suddenly I picked my head up, I looked around, I had my eyes wide open, and I said, holy shnikes, how did we get here? How did we end up with just 1 at the table? Now, as a person who's, we'll use the expression, fairly advanced in my professional career, I'm finding myself much more willing these days to stick my neck out and say really unpopular things like, holy shnikes, what's the deal? And so after that particular meeting, I went into the CIO's office and I said, I think we have a sincere problem here. Now, I tried not to just phrase it as it's not reasonable for me to be the only female in the room, but to talk to him about diversity of perspective, that I think women approach problem solving differently than men do, and that that's valuable, that women form relationships with the business differently than men do, and that that's valuable, and he agreed, which was great. And so he looked at me and he said, well, solve it, Deb, just go solve it. Okay, thanks, yep, I'll go do that. So as Linda advised, you just have to start, right? You jump in with both feet and you start. So I sat down in my office one afternoon and I tried to put together a plan of what it might look like to try and help solve this problem. I'm a firm believer in paddling your own canoe. Is that an expression people are familiar with professionally? You know, you're in your canoe, you're probably alone, and you're the one that needs to paddle it, otherwise you're just going to drift along until you land on the rocks or end up downstream, and it's much better that you control where you're going than letting the waters take you wherever they're going to go. So I drafted the plan, and I decided to approach the issue by first talking with women in IT and the IMF about how they could help themselves. I decided to invite all of the women in IT to a discussion. We have about 110 permanent staff in IT and the IMF, of which 32 are women. And so I sent an invitation to those 32 women, and I reserved an ample-sized conference room, and thought, well, I'll be lucky if half of them show up, really. Well, I was really delightfully surprised when 30 of the 32 showed up. So clearly there was an interest. The group agreed we'd meet every 6 to 8 weeks, and we sort of laid out how we might approach what the conversations should look like. And so for a 6-month or so period, we invited a senior woman from the IMF into the room every time, not necessarily an IT person. I did it once, but after that, well, I was the only senior IT person to invite. So we went out and we talked to some of the senior economists and other folks from around the fund. And we had them come in and share their career journey. They talked about things like you mentioned around a work-life balance. And then we also decided we would share the conversation. So we'd have them talk for half an hour, and then we'd talk about development topics. So I'm going to run through some of the topics that we covered as a group, because I think they'll go to some of the things that you mentioned, Dorine, around how to help yourself get to the table, which I think is really vital. Exposure and visibility was one of the first topics we covered. And when I'm talking about exposure and visibility, I'm talking about sort of raising your hand for the opportunities that come along, for which women will frequently sit on their hands. These tend to be sort of the high profile, riskier things. My advice to the women in the room was make sure you're at the right moment in life to do this, that you're willing. It's going to require personal sacrifice, and you need to be at a moment where you can do that and make that personal sacrifice. If you have an excellent life partner, which I hope you all have excellent partners with you, I do, I'm really fortunate, you can take those risks as long as you've jointly agreed that that's a sensible thing and that they'll pick up more of the other parts of your life to help with that work-life balance question. And we ought to recognize that those high-profile opportunities are also high risk, right? So you really need to be in a space in your head and in your life where you can jump in and give that your full, undivided attention, enthusiasm, and effort. But the benefits can be huge, right? It's a great opportunity for some visibility with people who may not have worked with you before, to get your name in different circles than it's been before, and all of that can be really powerful. Second, we talked about diversity of experience, and in that case, I'm talking about not just moving to get promoted, but considering moving laterally, either within your organization or outside of your organization, to get a different perspective on life. The value of moving laterally, I think, is really twofold. One, it exposes you to different issues and problem-solving techniques and styles and different kinds of issues, but it also creates and increases your network of senior people who have seen your work. So I will say to anyone who comes to me for guidance in the IMF, so you've worked for me, Deb, you've been here for 10 years, and you've been working for me, Deb, for 10 years. So when we go and we talk about who the high performers are at the IMF, I'm raising my hand and saying, Annette is a brilliant performer and she's been with me for 10 years. And everybody else in the room is just going like this. If Annette has worked for me for 5 years, and then she went to work for you for 5 years, now when we're having that conversation, I say, Annette's brilliant, she's done a fabulous job for me for these last 5 years. And you might jump in and say, and you know what, when she was working for me, I saw that potential too. And there's power in that. There is power in more than one person recognizing your potential. So building those relationships and those networks through a diversity of experience, I think, is really valuable. And it makes you more valuable just from bringing in those additional skills and perspectives. The third topic that we talked about was contacts, networking, and relationships. Several of us around the table, you talked about it in the context of finding your clients. You all talked about it as well, and I think it's something that women do really well, so we need to be mindful of leveraging it well. You need to develop a network of people within your organization and outside of your organization. And both of these are important. I'm going to use a phrase that someone said to me about 1.5 years ago, and I thought, oh, I never thought about it that way. She said, Deb, you need to know who's got your back when you're not in the room. I said, I beg your pardon? She said, when they're all talking and you're not there, who is standing up and saying, Deb would be awesome for that, or Deb's got the right answer on that, you should talk to her. You need to have a network of people who are going to have your back when you're not in the room. That was really important to me. And a network of people outside is also really useful. So I'll give you an example. Just this week, we started a knowledge management program within the International Monetary Fund. The managing director is now commissioned. And the gentleman that they selected to chair this group came to me as the head of knowledge and information management in IT and said, do you know anybody that could come talk to us? And so I whipped out my LinkedIn list of connections, and I said, well, I've got this professor at the University of Maryland, I've got this guy who owned his own consulting firm, I've got these 3 people who have written these books, I've got people at the World Bank, the IFC, IADB, and so on. He said, oh, you do know people. And suddenly my value to him and this process my real estate went up on that move, I gotta say. But it's really important, right? Because you aren't just what you are in your organization. You are a sum total of all of the parts, of all of the connections that you've made along the way, including some of the people that you've met in this room through this forum. So I think that's a really important thing to build and leverage over time. And as I say, I think women tend to do it well and a little more effortlessly than men do. And then finally, we spent some time talking about effective communications. We talked about how some of the differences between men and women and how we speak, between how men and women are heard, and had some really interesting conversations with Deborah Tannen. Anybody familiar with Deborah Tannen's work? And we watched one of her videos, and then we had a separate conversation with her. What was fascinating to me in some of these things was she pointed out what I thought was just a Deb phenomena, but apparently it happens to other people too. So as I sat at that table with the 16 men and Deb in the room, and we'd meet together to solve a problem, which was good. We had a purpose. We were going to try and solve a problem. And I'd say, well, have we thought about doing X? Here's a possible approach to this. And it wouldn't even get a response. And the men would keep talking. And then 5 minutes later, another man in the room would say, hey, wait, I've got an idea. And it would be verbatim what I said 5 minutes before. And I finally looked up and I said, are you kidding me? No. So I decided I would point this out to the men in the room. And I said, look, you're my respected peers and partners in this organization. You do this to me, and it's got to stop. Again, I'm getting old in my career, and I'm willing to say things like, it's got to stop. And they said, oh, no, we don't do that to you, Deb. We respect you. We trust you. We listen to you. I said, okay, the next time it happens, I'm going to stop the conversation. I'm going to do a timeout on the conversation and point out where it just occurred. They said, oh, sure, fine. I was like, sure enough, the next week we had a meeting. 5 minutes in, I say, we could approach it this way. We could look at the problem this way. And they kept on talking. And 15 to 20 minutes later, now mind you, we've had 16 high-paid people sitting in that room now for 30 minutes, which we could have been done with much earlier. Another man in the room says, I've got an idea. It's a great idea. Why don't we do this? I did. Time out. Hello. Stop here. What? That is exactly what I just said. And they all looked at me like I had 4 heads. And then I could look around the room and watch the little light bulb come on. Ping, 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 ping. Oh, we did just do that to you. So one of my rules now within the leadership group is I just do this. All I have to do is this when they do it. And they go, what was it you said exactly? So I'm hoping that over time we can train them to behave differently in this setting. They are trainable, and they have learned the signal. So I encourage you all to be bold and take the opportunity to point out where these things occur. So those were some of the things that we talked about as a group in the early days of our Women in IT group, and that was the first 8 months, roughly, something like that, Debbie. And while I found these conversations fascinating, I figured, 2 to 3 meetings in, interest would wane, people would get busy. I was doing it at lunchtime, nobody was getting a break, they were bringing their food, we were trying to eat and talk at the same time. But to my complete surprise, people kept coming. They kept coming, and then they started bringing their friends who were sort of loosely IT, a business analyst that sat out in the business, or somebody in the library who's got a library science degree, which rhymes with so fine. So we started, the group grew instead of getting smaller, and I was really expecting it to shrink. So as we wrapped up the first phase of the program, it became clear we were going to need to establish a more explicit and structured approach to really start to shift that 16-to-1 ratio, because while I can encourage people to do things to help themselves, we were going to need to try something a little more systemic and systematic to get to the heart of the problem. So the women were enthusiastic to help, which was great. They all came together and sort of defined the problem, and they performed a lot of rigorous data analysis to going to the points that each of you raised about You need to be ruthlessly fact-based when you're working on these things. We gathered a bunch of data, and it surfaced some interesting trends. We interviewed women who'd recently left the IMF, because what we were seeing was not only were we not hiring a reasonable number of women, but more women than men were leaving. And so we were asking questions about why. And a lot of the answers to those questions were around, we don't offer part-time work, we don't have reasonable work-life balance. We expect everyone to do the same number of hours doing their activities as everyone else. And the reality is you need a more flexible approach. So those were some of the issues that we heard as well. We interviewed senior staff about the hiring processes and what they did as part of making candidate selections and how did that work. And so at that point, I decided to shift my eyes wide open, pick your head up, keep your eyes wide open mantra, to change slightly. So we'd done a lot of discovery, we understood some problems. Now I felt like it was important for us to be bold and establish a path forward. We needed to do some good things and make some substantial changes in the organization. And so I enlisted the help of the women, I enlisted the help of our HR group, I enlisted the help of the CIO, I enlisted the next tier, so the women, the section chiefs at the level just below me, to help also go out and take different portions of our program forward. And so now we had a whole army of people working on trying to solve the problem. We set some pretty ambitious targets, and we've made some good progress. So 2 years later, after we set those targets, we have a woman CIO. We had sent a note to management saying, we think this is a problem. We think that change starts at the top, and we'd encourage you to consider when you're looking for a new CIO that you bring on a woman. They did. Susan Swart is our CIO now. She's from the State Department. She's fantastic. We have 3 women now at the IT leadership table, so not nearly the numbers we're aspiring to. We aspire to have 6 by the end of 2017, but we're also trying to be reasonable in how quickly change can occur. We have an unusually low attrition rate at the IMF in IT, probably similar to the kinds of things you were talking about, Linda. For recruitment, we've set some targets. We are targeting for IT to be 50-50 male-female by 2017. Now, there are people that roll their eyes at me when I say this, and and say, well, you know, are there that kind of numbers coming out of universities and da-da-da, and I say, it's not that hard. We have 32 now. To get to 50-50, we need to be just over 50. I bet we can find 18 qualified women in the whole of the world to work in IT at the IMF. I bet we can, if we really put our minds to it. So there we go, we're working on that. While I hear you on the setting rules doesn't necessarily make it so, and I absolutely do hear you, we did set up a few new requirements in our recruitment process. So there is a woman on every interview panel. The thing we observe is that people hire people like themselves, because when you make a connection in an interview, you're typically connecting with people like you. If all of the people doing the interview are men, guess which candidate's going to be more likely to get through to the next round. So we make sure there's a woman on every interview panel out there. We track our hiring. We ensure that there are women in the pipeline. So we do global recruitment campaigns. We go out and we look for people. I'm in the process of putting together a packet. They're going to the Middle East in a couple of weeks to do a recruitment campaign. I will be handing them a packet that says why it's great to be a woman in IT at the IMF, with hopes of bringing a few women in from the Middle East. And we track and report on our progress quarterly, and I sit in on that conversation. So it's not just HR talking to HR, it's HR talking to me as well, and the CIO is in that conversation also. As I say, it's not sufficient to just set targets, but it does keep it on everyone's radar, and if you're reporting out to how are we doing, everyone gets reminded with some frequency, this is important, we need to be doing better. We also established an education program, so all IT staff, men and women alike, participate in a course on communication between the genders, gender bias, and micro inequities, which I thought was a really interesting and refreshing course for us. It was surprising to me how many women show bias against women. We need to help each other Is it Madeleine Albright?
Yes.
Madeleine Albright, there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. But it was very interesting, and again, they used scientific research where they had people audition, for instance, for an orchestra. This was a study done not long ago. People auditioning for an orchestra would come in, and was it 3 times as many times they selected the man over the woman when they could see who was performing? Mm-hmm. And when they put them behind a screen and you couldn't see who was performing, the women were selected more often than the men. It's life, folks. So that education was important. We also offered an assertive communications for women course to all women in our entire department, so that they get some opportunities to work on the kinds of skills, because yes, we'll be called bitches, but to learn to use those assertive skills in ways that maybe we can avoid a little bit.
Well, it's really interesting to see that women want to find much less.
Yes, yes, I agree with you. So I think that's been helpful. In networking, in addition to keeping our little group going, one of the senior women reached out to the World Bank, IFC, Inter-American Development Bank, World Health, and said, would you guys like to get together for a breakfast from time to time and bring a couple panelists in to talk? We've only done that a couple of times now because it's hard to get 500 women together anywhere, ever. But that is going well, and people are making connections now around our agencies and doing some mobility, which is a good thing. So people are moving into other organizations to get some of those cross-agency experiences, which I think is really helpful. So in wrapping up now, what advice do I have for you? I would say go into your conversations with your eyes wide open. Be ruthlessly fact-based in deciding whether you have a problem or not. You might not. If you decide that there is a problem and you want to solve it, you have to figure out if you're standing alone or is there organizational willingness to solve it. So you're going to need to get buy-in. You were talking about change leadership. It's important to have buy-in. I had the CIO had my back. Our new CIO, Susan Schwartz, said, Deb, this is a really good program. You need to send a note up to the managing director to tell her what you're doing. We did, and sure enough, that thing got blasted out to all the department heads because they said, oh, this is a good thing. So you need to have some support. You alone won't be able to do the kind of change you want to see. Can you articulate a plan, and is it measurable? So you mentioned what will success look like? How will we know if we're there? So you need to have some measures that are going to tell you whether you've made a real difference in your plan or not. Are your time frames realistic? If you have really low attrition in an organization, swapping out 50% of the leadership isn't going to work, right? But you can in a year. But you could say over a 5-year window or a 3-year window. Pick a reasonable window that you're going to be able to do things. And again, how do you know when you're done? So my final piece of advice to you is to go in with your eyes wide open, do your homework, and then, like my colleagues at the table said, be bold, do good things. Thanks for your time.
I'll just get up and speak. I'm not sure how the microphone is functioning. Thank you so much. This was a really wonderful discussion, and I just have such admiration for all of you and what you shared with us. We have a few minutes for Q&A, and I thought I'd kick it off with a question. Actually, Deb, you talked about the success bringing together women in your organization and how that has grown. Siobhan, you talked about mentorship through local community business groups, etc. I wonder if everyone could talk a little bit about mentorship and the role that has played for you personally in your career, and also for how you see the world and lead your teams.
Well, I'll jump in. I've been really impressed in the government space how many programs are fostering active coaching and mentoring, diversity programs, executive leadership programs, very extensive and top-notch programs, as well as informal. So really institutionalizing some of that, and I look at that and I think, oh, wow, I sure wish I had some of that when I started out, which was clawing my way and, you know, being the only woman at the table for years and decades and no formal mentors, et cetera. So I see that, and it's just, if you are lucky enough to work in an industry or an agency where you've got those things, taking advantage of that is really going to help you, I think, jump start and leapfrog. If you don't have any of that, you still always have the choice of, you see people you admire and recognize, you just go after them, you ask for help, you ask for advice, you can always get there.
I had a colleague who had never been in a headquarters organization, and she said, "Will you mentor me?" And I go, "Sure." I don't know why you would need it, but she said, "I don't know how to do the politics." So we would meet for lunch every couple of weeks, and it was really very helpful for her, but for me as well. I also think that you need that when you have an opportunity, there's a difference between a sponsor and a mentor. Sometimes a mentor is someone that you say, "Oh, I've got this problem, help me solve it." A sponsor is someone who says, "I know somebody who can do this job," you know, and who's there at the table and really works. As a leader in the organization, I regularly ask my directors, "Have you interviewed a woman?" And one of them looked at me, and she was a he. He said, "What?" And I said, "Think about it." And he ended up actually picking the woman because she was the best qualified, because she had the best action-oriented communication skills and the ability to get things done. Which again points to the fact that you may be a great writer, you may be a great planner, but if you're an introvert and you just sit back and let things happen and not take any action, you're not going to be a good manager. You need to stick to your technical skills, which are highly valuable. So that kind of quality.
Thank you so much for pointing out the difference between a sponsor and a mentor, because I do find that a lot of women especially get that confused. I've really only had one sponsor in my life, and it's kind of a mixed blessing in that it was very beneficial, but at the same time, if a relationship sours, that person moves into something else, you're sort of stuck with that, you know, reputation and so forth. So, but it can be very, very beneficial. But it is different from a mentor. A mentor, oftentimes people I consider to be my mentors, I would never say to their face, "You're my mentor," because it seems a little weird. It's more like these are people who have given me fantastically valuable advice and who've cared enough about where I am and what I'm doing to really seek me out at times and say, "Hey, how's it going? What can we do to kind of help things along?" And in turn, I actually really love mentoring. I'm involved with the Women in Technology group here in Washington, and I also do a lot of mentoring with my staff. I actually get, I think, a lot more out of it than my mentees do. I mean, I don't know what they say, but I just learned so much about everyone's paths. And it also, I mean, there's a real big ego boost on my side. You're like, wow, there's something I'm saying that you find valuable. But I think it's really important to keep, again, it's not about I'm the mentor, you're the mentee. It's about we're both giving to each other. Actually, there's a really great program that the World Bank is rolling out, and they're trying to do knowledge management, social networking, you probably know about this, called the Reverse Mentoring Program. And what they were doing was they were partnering younger employees with older employees. The younger employees were there to help the older employees understand about the social networking components that they were rolling out, and the older employees were helping them understand the politics behind the bank. Talk about a fantastic dual mentorship program. I thought it was amazing, and I want to hear more about it actually.
Any questions from the audience?
I have a question. This is an excellent panel. I really learned a lot from everyone, and I particularly liked your way of handling conflict and this gesture instead of cursing them out or just doing something really man-like kind of. You did something soft but very powerful. And I find that sometimes being the owner of IT company, I find that I'm among men a lot of times, and there are things they don't listen to me while somebody else says the same thing suddenly becomes a brilliant idea. And so my question for you is, being often the one or a few sitting at the IT executive table, when you have a real conflict, it can be really serious conflict. How do you usually, what are the strategies you use to handle?
I go to the facts. I'm a trained facilitator. I've facilitated for 25 years, you know, small and large groups and everything. So the first thing you do is say, okay, let's get the facts out, you know, and so we make the list. And then we say, what can we agree on?
What do we agree on?
It's the old Thomas Jefferson sales concept is to get people to agree to everything, but what they can't agree to. And then he said, well, if we could solve this problem, could we move forward?
Yep.
And you pick them off one at a time. There's a book, a really weird book. It's called How to Make $1 Million in Real Estate. I believe it is, selling real estate. Years ago, and in that was where I learned how to engage people to sell and to get people to go to agreements. Quite literally, you learn certain questioning techniques and certain little scenarios, like the Thomas Jefferson, you know, kind of thing. And you can work through the most difficult situations by just using these techniques. There's another one called Tongue Fu by a woman that I used to use when I trained facilitators. But my staff, all my consulting staff, have been trained in the technique, and I give them, we have, you know, scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how do you deal with somebody who comes at you really angry?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, you walk right up to them, shake their hands, and tell them how wonderful it is to be there.
Mm-hmm.
That you're so glad you finally got to get a hold of them. Let's sit down and talk. And you're holding that guy's hand. So there are really techniques you can learn. It is not something that is just like an art. It is a discipline you can learn.
And I think part of it also is, at some point, you have to learn that you can stand up for yourself, and that you need to stand up for yourself. And I mean, for me personally, it was a hard lesson because, again, you know, as a woman, I'm raised to want to please everyone, to keep them happy, feel bad when people are mad at me. And then what you start realizing is that you're getting taken advantage of over and over again. And at some point, just being the emotional side of, I'm just going to not be popular.
That's right.
And then I can figure out ways to do it where I'm not destroying a relationship. So I have this go-to phrase, which was, I love you like a brother, but now I have to kill you. When I'm standing up to somebody, right? You know, sort of injecting a little bit of humor. And there's lots of other ways of doing it too. And
a great line of mine is when somebody says something that's weird, either it doesn't make sense, or it's an attack, or they take you, oh, I say, excuse me? What did you say?
Right, exactly.
The other thing that's really important, if you're getting into conflict that is not face-to-face, email escalations, text escalations, stop. Cease and desist.
We have a rule.
Walk up the hall, make an appointment with the person, pick up the phone even. The phone is better than the email text thing, but you have to make a personal connection to try to diffuse the situation. And start with we seem to be way out of sync. You know, right up front, we're way out of sync here. What do we need to do to get better?
And then pause. Do not keep talking.
Yep.
Make them talk. Respond to them.
There's a great therapy technique actually when you're really out of sync with somebody, especially very emotional topics, where you let somebody talk until they're done. And you know, you can take notes, but you're not taking notes with the intention of telling them why they're wrong. You're taking notes so that after they're done talking, you tell them what you heard. You can tell them flat out, you know, I'm not saying that I agree with you, I just want to make sure that I understand your point of view. It's tremendously powerful for people to feel heard. They're much more willing to compromise and take your point of view, because then you turn around and say, okay, now my turn. You ask them to do it to you. But it really is, and again, I mean, there's the facts, but there's also always an emotional component to people. And so part of the fact basis is trying to pull the emotions out of it. But yeah, we have a rule at our company, 3 exchanges and it's escalating, you're not going anywhere, stop emailing, pick up the phone.
And it's that sort of listening in a very genuine way. You
Right.
really are
Mhm.
trying to understand and figure out what that core issue, what caused it to escalate, and that you are aware. You may still not agree, but it really does diffuse the situation.
Okay. Well, my question is, well, I'm relatively new in my position. I've only been there for about 2 years, and I'm constantly confronted with situations that are new to me. And I asked to make some decisions, and I guess my question of the panel is, how do you go into a situation that's new and establish credibility, get enough information to make a good decision? You know, what questions do you ask that you can basically take from one situation to another that just work for you? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Go ahead.
So for me, I'm assuming you're getting a question, or you're being asked something where you have at least a little bit of time before
Mhm.
you have to jump in with results and answers.
Right.
So the first thing I do is do some research myself.
Mhm.
Then I reach out to my network, trusted people that I think this rhymes with something I heard somebody else talk about, or a book I read, or whatever. So I go out to that network. And then third, I get with the person who's asking something of me and ask them a boatload of questions. And I realize that sometimes people feel stupid asking questions. The more basic the question, the better, right? You can get down to some really fundamental stuff. And if you can get agreement, again, at that very fundamental level, and then you can go a little bit deeper, and a little bit deeper, a lot of whys. Why is it that when we do X, da-da-da-da, why does that work that way? Why?
Mhm.
And then you can get to the hows.
And getting to the questions, I can't tell you how many times I've had people go off and do, and since they didn't ask the questions, they went off and answered the wrong question. I mean, they didn't really understand what was being asked or what the problem was, et cetera. And so a lot of time and effort was wasted, or embarrassment, or whatever it was, or they just missed an opportunity to really wow somebody. And it's that fear of asking questions, and really understanding that listening skill is so important, because that's what you're going to take from scenario to scenario, is how to ask the right questions to understand the problem space and what you want to do.
Somebody could, so somebody comes to your boss and she said, I need you to pick, to figure out how to do this. My first response is, that is really a great opportunity. I need to know a little more about what you're trying to accomplish. And let me know. And then you just keep going, yeah, that's, yeah, let's get my cat, yeah. I've never looked at something that way. What else should I know before I go marching?
The
And
context
it'll
of
dissolve.
everything.
What I find is, because we do a lot of consulting, and actually one of the reasons why we came up with these 4 standard questions that we always ask, we make sure we have the answers to it, we don't necessarily ask them this way, was because we would build technology solutions and they wouldn't work, and then the technology would be blamed. For example, we built a system for a government agency that was collecting project data, including budget data. And we were getting bug reports that said that people were putting in their data, but it was getting lost. Or they couldn't log into the system, or their login wasn't working, or something was not happening. And we were getting all these bug reports, and we couldn't track it down. We could not figure out what was going on, because the logs weren't showing any of this data. Turns out, sequestration. Everyone was worried that their budgets were going to be cut, and so they were worried by putting their data into the system that there's then going to be reported to Congress, and then Congress would say, oh, here's a big fat pot of money that we can cut. The technology was being blamed for a policy issue. We ended up actually getting really kind of screwed over by it, because we ended up doing free work because we thought we had a buggy system.
They just weren't doing it.
And they just weren't bringing the data in.
This is where you
But
fire the client.
no, right. But this was a military agency, and you do not refuse a direct order. You just can't comply because the system doesn't let me do it. Okay? So we now have a rule that we try to understand all the policies and processes behind it and ask these 4 questions. What is the business purpose of this project? What is the business goal? Why are we doing it this way? What does success look like? And any specific metrics would be fantastic. And who are the stakeholders involved? And that's not just all the people with fingers on the keyboards, but I do want to know every single body's got fingers on the keyboards, eyeballs on the screen. People always forget about the admins and the data entry people. But I also want to know about the stakeholders, people who are going to hold up payment because they didn't decided that this thing wasn't what they wanted. We try to make sure all those questions are answered as much detail as we possibly can, because those are things that are going to undermine your success. And what I find really fascinating is the question, what does success look like? The number of times people cannot answer that. They can get into all sorts of detail about, we want to have a database, we want to have a map, and we want to have it, with a single sign-on, and blah, 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 blah. So what does success look like? Because otherwise, I don't know if I failed or not.
And for those of you who actually do project work, we are way past the what do you call it, the age when you develop a system for one particular organization or function. Most of the projects you do today are cross-agency or cross-division, and it took the Peace Corps a year to figure out what I was trying to do with it. We never go anywhere without a steering committee. We have decision-making business champions who are appointed by the steering committee. We allow subject matter experts to participate, but they do not make decisions or set priorities. And we follow and I am on every steering committee with all the business people who will be impacted by the system. There is good literature out there, unfortunately, is one of them, of course, but what sets up this whole structure so that you can do good systems that everyone buys into. And the problem is they want you to build the system where they haven't decided what the business process really is,
Yep.
and what is the data they really want.
Yep.
And my team struggled for a year using the old-fashioned way. And then I took them away from that into the new way. I just hadn't gotten to that part of it, changing the business yet. And they did in 4 months what they took a year to do before, and they have a really tight decision-making set of business people who know exactly how to act in a business development environment. So it's methodology, standards, doing the right things at the right time, getting the decisions, having an issue management law that allows you for every issue. Who has to carry this issue? Who has to decide it? By what time does it have to decide? And is it a showstopper? So if you do that kind of discipline in everything you do, you'll survive. You will be able to move forward and make change. If you don't do that, if the business isn't willing, because most systems today are intuitive enough, you don't train them to use the system, you train them to use the business process around which the system is designed. And you have to have the business people do that. And you have to have them accountable to be the tier 2 support once the question comes in. If they can't answer the question, it goes to our side for technical tier 2 support. So it's really important that your business people, you teach them how to work and be part of building the solution. Even if it's out of the box, we got to configure it. So that's really cool.
Yes, go ahead.
Can you expand on that a little bit? What did you mean when you referred to the old way and the new way? Do you have a specific methodology you were talking about?
Well, the old way is I would, as a business analyst, and I was working with 4 departments, I'd go to have a meeting with this department and gather the requirements. Then I'd have a meeting with this department and gather their requirements. Then I'd have a meeting with that department and gather their requirements. And then I was blamed when the requirements were in conflict. What do you mean? We gave you all our requirements. No, you gave me 4 different sets of requirements against which you guys are playing each other off politically. So you got to get all of them in the room to take them through data, to take them through the requirements together, and the way to do that is through relational data modeling. Because if you're going to get them to agree on the information, they agree on the language, and then if you take them through first and second normal form, they will know that they will define their business rules. And business rules are who can create, who can update, who can read or view, and who can delete data. And then you get all your roles and permissions, you get all your business processes by taking them through this in a workshop environment. And then once you get the big framework, then you can go and work, and then you know where to listen for the issues and bring them back together. So it's really we used to call it in the old days joint application development or joint application design. So I'm pretty passionate about it because I did it for 30 years with customers all over the United States and in Europe and in Australia. And it changed how they do business. So it's a if you're interested in systems design, requirements, the front end of the business, you need to learn data modeling, you need to learn facilitation and large group management because you will have 30 people in the room and you got to know how to set that up and make it work. But you can get it. You can cut weeks and months off the requirements by doing it this way.
One of the reasons why I love technology, to be honest, is that it's business processes made concrete. And a lot of what we do is we do performance enhancement tools where someone wants to take an offline process and turn it into an online process. And it becomes really clear how bad humans are at consistency. And that's what computers are good at. They're really good at making things consistent. They're really dumb at exceptions. And so the politics and the nuance, the change management part of technology, I find fascinating, but it's hard because it's dealing with people. The software part, that's actually fairly straightforward. It's fun too. But what you're talking about is actually figuring out what's going to make everyone.
It's the messy part of it, I see.
Really messy. When it's messy, the dirt is. That's where the fun stuff is.
I think we have time for one more question.
Sorry, hi, my name is Sonjara. I was just wondering, I think the reason why many women don't go to technology is because of work-life balance. And I think Deborah just said that at IMF many women just quit because of lack of flexibility. So I was wondering if you tried to handle this problem, and also IRS and the company, if you are facing this problem also, are you trying to do something for that? I think Sandra just said for her it's fixed because they have the flexibility they need. So I was just wondering, and also is it a sensitive change? Because I think men may say, why do you give more flexibility to women? Again, I'm just wondering.
Can I answer that really quickly? We actually don't have a work-life balance policy for women. We have a work-life balance policy for all employees. So our employees, for example, we had one guy whose wife had chronic illness and had a special needs daughter. And so she was one point hospitalized, and then when she came out, she was much better. She had a full-time job where they were like stapling her to a desk, right? She couldn't leave the job. So he was the one taking his daughter to PT and to Girl Scouts and so forth. And he could not, it was harder for him to find a job with work-life balance than it was for her. I mean, he actually got fired from several jobs when he asked if he could take a couple hours off he said, can I take off 2 hours every Tuesday to take my daughter to PT? They actually fired him for that. We have someone who actually did their master's degree here, part-time, while working for us. Someone who volunteered rescuing feral cats as her big passion. So I think work-life balance is something for all people, and we want to make sure we're not having it for mothers, because it's really just another way of mommy tracking, which we don't. Anyway, so.
We've got a lot of flexibility, and again, it's not focused on just women, it's for the workforce. In recent years, a lot of emphasis on teleworking, where the job permits it and you can still get the job done, and et cetera. So those sorts of flexibilities have, I think, done a great deal on the whole work-life balance, and I know that people have grown to really appreciate and rely on those flexibilities where it's possible.
If it's really critical for you to have that balance, look for a government job. Look at the government sector. They have done more for work-life balance than anywhere else I have encountered, because I've worked with private industry most of my career. or very large organizations like Microsoft or Google or Verizon or AT&T, Deloitte, they, in order to keep their talent, they do that. Small, medium-sized to small organizations, they're in a cut and throat blood survival, and so they just aren't as flexible. At least that's my experience.
Well, I mean, I
more
think it's
Brady ones like Hertz and
it's a very case. I would say it's very case by case, and I do find that you can assume that women-owned businesses might be more flexible, but that's not necessarily the case. But you're right. I mean, for us, we do it because we found that there's some productivity benefits to it, but a lot of people have told me that I'm stupid. I mean, flat out told me you're going to go bankrupt if you have these policies. You need to work your employees all hours and so forth. I'm like, but I don't want a business if that's
if
what
you're not having fun, why do it?
Exactly.
I think that's a good note to end
Oh,
on.
gosh.
That is a good
There we
note.
go. And thank you all. You should all be on our mailing list, so please keep in touch and keep an eye out for some upcoming events. We're hoping to do something in the next few weeks around commencement. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for both being brave men who were willing to come to a women in IT event.
Your audience had 2 minutes. We're doing it 14 years.
There we go. 16.
There you go.
Thanks.
Have a good one.
Thank you. You too.
We had 4 people on.